Hello, Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kessler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. There are two questions involved today from Dave, KB2UBO. He has two questions, one having to do with whether an antenna that works well as a dipole could be mounted as an inverted V. And then also, he's interested in trying to crimp some of his connectors. So these both relate to antennas. You could call this antennas and connectors, and I'll go over both of them. The first question has to do with an antenna from New Zealand. Let me show you what he wants to do with that. And we'll back this thing out so that we've got the whole whiteboard in view. Okay. He has an antenna from, that was designed by a guy in New Zealand. I'm sorry, South Africa, ZS, South Africa, 6 Bkw. I have not tried this antenna yet. Clearly, I need to do that. I'll have to call DX. I've got the channel funds, and I can go ahead and test this antenna. This is a sort of a growth of the G5RV. Kind of grew into this, okay. And there's still people who use these and do well with them. I have not had good luck with G5RV antennas. And then there's the Zs6 Bkw, okay? So this is what we have that we're dealing with. He has the thing strung as a dipole, which means there's a long drop of ladder line or window line. And then you come to a coax connector and back to the rig. Okay, and so this is a dipole. I'm not sure I should call it a dipole. It's a piece of wire. Okay, I think it's about 102 feet long. It's not resonant at any of the amateur radio frequencies. So we can't really call it a dipole, since a dipole has a frequency it's resonant at and is run at that resonant frequency, but dipole-ish. Okay, and then we have this window line here. Okay. Now, the window line is supposed to drop straight down all the way to the ground. You can pull the end of this out a little bit, but not at an angle. It'll really mess things up. His question is very simple. He runs it as a dipole quite successfully. What would happen if he ran it as an inverted V? And is there any reason to think that it would not work? Well, yes and no, but mostly no, meaning yes, you can go ahead and do that. This is a horizontal antenna, and a V is a special case of a dipole where you bend the legs down so that you only need one mast in the middle. Now, if you use metal here, you've got the fact that this window line is here. You need to buy or create some little clamps that will go on the mast with a stick like this out here, okay, and then something here to hold the open wire line. And it doesn't need to be much bigger than this. That way, the mast does not become part of the transmission line to any great extent, okay? So you need that to worry about with a wooden, if it's a wooden or a tree or something like that, not a problem. Now, you have a reference point that you know works with this thing up here. So I'm assuming you're at the same location and you want to go to an inverted V. You keep in mind that if you find that you can't work with the antenna in this dimension here, it will tune differently. Okay, so all the tuner settings that you've got for this thing up here won't work here, but other tuner settings hopefully will. You're going to have to retune, but this should work fine. Now, I recommend with inverted V's here that you keep this end about 8 feet off the ground so people can walk around here without guillotining themselves, or else for that last 8 feet, put up a little bit of wood fencing or something like that so people don't walk into that thing. And the same over here. Up in the air, if you need to use rope to bring it all the way down to a stake, just get some of that fencing that's 3 or 4 feet high and rolled up from Home Depot, and roll it out like that, so that, so this is 8 feet. At this point right here, that's 8 feet above the ground. The fencing can be here because people will see it and not trip over it. Safety first. Okay, so there you go. Now, one thing to remember too, and another reason to keep these ends up high, is the high voltage in the antenna is at the ends. You can get a nasty little RF burn touching the bottom of the antenna while you're transmitting on a voice peak or CW or something like that. Okay, so otherwise it will work fine. So the short answer to your question is yes, it should work fine. And the slightly longer answer is if it does not work out and you're unable to tune it there, just go back to the way you had it before. You know that you have a fallback position. Now, I will point out to you that an inverted V will have a more circular radiation pattern, whereas the dipole is a little bit less sensitive, perpendicular to the antenna. The inverted V tends to be more the other way. Also, it is lower, so it will be a bit of an NVIS antenna too. So things will change. It's not that they're going to be better or worse, just different. Okay, so there you go on that one. Now the next question has to do with crimp connectors. And instead of showing you on this, I'm going to show you how I do it. I went to Crimping Connectors when I first started using RG213, and I was unable to put a standard solder connector on it. I just am not adept at that sort of thing. This particular set comes from Quicksilver Radio, QSradio.com. QS, don't go QSRRA. It's QSRadio.com. This is Quicksilver Radio. They've got all kinds of little thingies, including this beautiful set here for crimping. They throw in an extra wire cutter. This is the main wire cutter. They threw in a little flashlight. These are the devices that you use to strip the coax to get it ready for crimping. Basically what you do is you put the coax in there, let it go, and then twirl this thing around the coax and then pull, and it will pull that stuff right off. Doesn't always work the first time. Also with this comes the actual crimping tool. This thing is hefty. Right now it is set up for doing power pole connectors. They've got what are called jaws. These parts right in here are replaceable. And I've got two sets of jaws. One for crimping RG8X size cable, and the other for crimping 213 or LMR 400 size cable. I would not recommend trying this with LMR 400 because using the standard crimping is just a royal pain with that, because the backing on the thing has an adhesive in the LMR 400 that is very difficult to peel off. For the LMR 400, if you're going to go ahead and pay that much for the cable, pay for the LMR 400 connectors and the LMR 400 crimp kit. It's different, a completely different concept than this, and makes for beautiful, beautiful connections. This one here, what you do is you've got to get a crimp connector. So let's pull out a crimp type connector. Let's see, these are solder type connectors. Now in the solder connector, this is this is RG8X cable, and there is a sleeve in here that has to come out, and you pull the cable maybe with this much sticking out of it. There's specific instructions here for having to do it. And then you bring this, and don't forget to put this on first, bring this down here, and this will hold that in tight. And there are two places you solder. You solder the tip, then you may have to trim or grind this to get it so that there's not a big lump of solder there. And then these itty bitty teensy weensy tiny little holes that you see right there and there and there, you will see braid. And you need to solder that so that it solders to the connector, to this outer part here, okay? Now, it will be a lot easier to do that if you will first, before you put this in there, put a little bit of solder flux, rosin core flux. You can buy flux at Home Depot. You can get acid core or rosin core. Get the rosin core. It might be called electrical flux or something like that. Never use acid core flux on these things. But then if you put it here also, and then put a little on the braid, and by little I mean little, a little, you buy a small can, a small little tin of solder flux. It will last you the rest of your life. Anyway, then you put that down there like that, screw that on, and you have that soldered. Now the part that gets messed up in solder connections is this solder joint here in the middle. That's what gets messed up. People don't get that soldered very well. So you want to get that soldered, and you'll make mistakes when you do these. These are cheaper than the LMR 400 connectors, but they're still not the easiest in the world. Okay, now let's look at the RG8X crimp connectors. There's two pieces to it. There's a sleeve, okay, and there's a connector here. Now what you're going to do is you use the stripper tool to strip this right, and there are instructions and dimensions for all of this. And then you put this in here, keeping the braid on the outside of this, and then this comes over this like this, okay? And you've got copper sticking out here. And then this is what you crimp on that ferrule right there. You crimp that with the tool, the big tool. Now you've got you still have to do the solder on the connector right here, okay? Now, one of the nice things that it does is get you a really nice connection with the ground side, the braid. One of the problems I have run into with these connectors is that the cable sheath, the black poly, will pull out of this thing, and then you don't have a good solid connection with the braid. So I've just gone in and taken the pliers. If you see braid coming out here, just squeeze those, and that takes care of the problem. So which do I like, soldered or crimped? Well, if you buy a pre-made coax cable, you're going to find that it's crimped. You can get them soldered, but you'll pay extra for it. Okay. So bottom line, I crimp because it's easier. It's real easy to solder the inner conductor. If you are having trouble with that, you can buy the cables pre-made. They're almost always crimped, and they crimp both the outer shield and the inner wire. And something is making noise. Oh well, we'll figure it out in a minute. Now, I love the way the PL259s go on the LMR 400, but those are like $25 a connector. So, and then you've got to buy the LMR 400 or the Times Microwave tool that's different from this. The Times Microwave tool makes a beautiful cut, and the whole thing is crimp, and you push the thing in, just push it in and do the crimping with the tool, and you're done. There's also a little piece of heat shrink tubing that comes with it. This is an LMR 400, and this note, see the heat shrink here keeps everything together and relatively waterproof. This is not waterproof here, so you're going to want to put something around that to make it waterproof. Note that this always stays out, so you have to screw it all the way on to make sure it gets on. But it is a very nice connection, if expensive. But if you're doing this for your DX antenna, you may want to do that. If you're spending the money for LMR 400, why not get the connectors that go with it? Okay, so I don't even know if this flashlight's still good. Oh, look at that. Isn't that cute? It's a little flimsy keychain. Put that on there, put that back. They have the pieces of paper that show you how to use the various tools. I got this off their website and printed this out. It's got all the directions for how to do this. Note this here that you have to give the tool a manly squeeze. I suspect you can do it if you're a female ham. You'll do just fine with this. But Quicksilver Radio is where I get this. You can get very similar kits from lots of other people, and they all do about the same thing. Okay, so there you have it. We've talked about using a dipole antenna as an inverted V. Really, the dimensions might change just a titch as you try and tune it, but not too much. An inverted V is a venerable antenna, very well proven, very popular. And then we've talked about crimping cables, making sure that you've got them waterproofed, and that if they pull out, you adjust it by squeezing it a little bit so that you get good solid connection on those things. That's the only problem I found with crimping cables, is that they do tend to come apart. Whereas the soldered connections won't come apart, but I've never had really good luck with soldering them very well. But you can if you use a little bit of rosin flux. The solder that we use has the flux already inside of it. But even with a hot iron, and you need a hot iron, the flux, there will not be enough flux there to attach all of those pieces together. So you'll need to do something there. So there you have it. Please subscribe. Please click like. If you would like to support this channel financially, you may certainly do so. And if you go to dcasler.com/support, you will find lots of different ways of doing that. And one may just be perfect for you. Until we next meet, 73.